Welcome to the Lacerta Files Part 2, brought to you by Space, the final frontier, above and beyond an open-minded channel. Part 2 has been broken down into 4 segments. We hope you enjoy this retelling of the Lacerta Files Part 2. Date of interview, April 27, 2000. The following statement given by Old K. The meeting began with an appraisal of diverse questions and opinions, which I had gotten from readers of the first transcript in anonymous fashion, through distribution from my trustworthy friends. Some of these opinions, altogether there were over 14 pages of paper, contained comments shaped by everything from a radically religious to a fanatical tendency to welcome contact with a reptilian species. Some of these comments contain stereotypical phrases like servants of hell or species of the evil one. I don't want to go into any kind of detailed description here, since I don't want to pass on further any false and radical realm of thought. I once again reaffirm that the following text is the absolute truth and is not fiction. It was composed from 3 original tape recordings, which were made on April 24, 2000, with a tape recorder during my second interview with the reptilian creature known as Lacerta, at Lacerta's request. The original text of 31 pages was revised and shortened up to deal with some questions and answers. Some existing questions were partially shortened or amended. It was even undertaken to extract message and significance from it. This part of the interview, either not mentioned or not mentioned completely in the transcript, deals primarily with personal issues, paranormal demonstrations, the social system of the reptilian species, and alien technology and physics. The reason for the shifting of the date and time of the second meeting was a possible observation and surveillance of my own person after the publication of the first transcript. Although everything was attempted on the advice of Lacerta to keep my identity a secret, just 2 days after the dissemination of the document abroad and various unusual events took place. Please don't think that I am paranoid. However, I believe that the publication of the interview has drawn either official attention or the attention of some organization to me. Up until this time, I usually regarded people who believed that they were being followed by the state to be nothing more than jokers. But now I have begun to revise my ideas on that since events in January. It began with a failure of my telephone for several hours. When the phone became operational once again, there were quiet echoes and strange clicking and whirring sounds when I made calls. A defect could, ostensibly, not be found anywhere. Overnight, important data disappeared from the hard drive in my computer. The testing program reported defective sectors, where strangely enough, there were only data which dealt with illustrations and completed textual material from the interview. These defective sectors also contained material of a paranormal nature in the field of my research. Fortunately, the material was also stored on floppies. In addition, I discovered by pure chance some hidden data in a likewise hidden directory index. The name which appeared on the data in the directory index was E72UJ. A friend who is a computer expert could not make anything of this designation, and when I was about to show it to him, the directory index had disappeared. One evening, my apartment door was standing wide open, my TV set was running, and I am absolutely confident that I had turned the TV set off. A minivan with British markings and the imprint of a Europe-wide supermarket chain parked in front of my house. I noticed the same minivan again on several occasions, traveling at a distance behind my car, even when I visited the town of 65 kilometers away. When I returned, the car was on the other side of the street once again. I never saw anyone get into or out of the car. A knock on the door of the vehicle and on the tinted windows caused no reaction of any kind. After about 2 weeks, the minivan disappeared again. When I informed EF personally about these events, he suggested that I change the place and date of the meeting in order to assure our own and Lacerta's safety. The meeting took place on April 27, 2000, in another isolated location. It was unobserved as far as I can determine. Once again, all of this may sound strange and paranoid, like a fantasy from a cheap science fiction film. However, I can only repeat to and assure the reader once again, all of this is the unadulterated truth. Believe my words or don't believe them. These things have happened and they will continue to happen, whether you believe it or not, until it is too late. Our civilization is in danger. May 3, 2000. Questions and answers. Part 1 of 2. When you read these religious and animosity-ridden comments here, what do you think and feel then? Is the relationship between your species and ours really shaped from that kind of total negation?
Does it amaze you that I am not completely angered by that? I had fully expected those kinds of extreme reactions. The programming for the utter negation of another species, especially the reptilian species, as in your own case, is deeply embedded in each of your own individual consciousnesses. This ancient conditioning stems from the days of your third artificial creation and, biologically speaking, is passed down as an information genome from generation to generation. The identification of my species with the powers of darkness was a primary intention of the Illojim, who liked seeing themselves in the role of the powers of light, something which in and of itself represents a paradox, since that humanoid species was extremely sensitive to your sunlight. In case you were expecting me to act offended, I guess I'll have to partially disappoint you. These obscure intentions are not really your fault. You are simply following, for the most part, what you have inherited from your ancestors. It is indeed actually somewhat disappointing that many of you develop no especially strong individual self-conscience, for this would help you to overcome the conditioning. As I already said, we were in direct contact in the last several centuries with some of your more primitive human tribes. These tribes had themselves succeeded in breaking through the old creation programming. They were able to meet us without tension, hate, and total rejection. Apparently, many of your modern civilized individuals are not in a position to think on their own, but rather let themselves be guided by programming and religion, which is also a manifestation of that ancient programming and part and parcel of the plan of the Illojim. Therefore, comments of that kind I'd sooner regard as amusing than irritating. They simply confirm, in large measure for me, my suppositions about your defined mode of thinking.
Therefore, you are not the species of the evil one, as was remarked earlier?
How am I supposed to answer that? Your people still think according to a simple and completely inappropriate scheme of generalizations. Simply put, there are absolutely no purely evil species. There exist in every terrestrial and extraterrestrial species alike both good and evil individuals. It's even true of your own people. But there is no such thing as an absolutely evil species. This conception is really very primitive. You people have believed from time immemorial what you are supposed to believe, what was foreseen for you to believe by your creators. Every well-known species, even the more highly developed ones, consists of a great number of individual consciousnesses. At least a portion of the consciousness is individual, even though there are connecting fields of consciousness. These self-sufficient spirits are able to decide freely for themselves a lifestyle which is either good or evil, according to your own human standards. It depends again on the respective point of view. Your people are not necessarily in a position to judge whether the deeds of a much more highly developed species are good or evil, because you stand at a lower observation point, from which an assessment is not possible. Your simple words, good and evil, are in any case examples of a tendency towards generalization. In my language, there are many concepts for the various shades of meaning of individual behaviors in comparison to the norms of a society. Even those extraterrestrial species which are inclined to act with antagonism towards you, are not species of the evil one, even though they operate negatively with respect to your own race. They do this for their own reasons and do not regard themselves as evil. Were your structured way of thinking more linear and more focused as theirs is, then you would also behave in such a fashion. The attitude of a species towards other kinds of existence naturally depends very heavily on its respective structured way of thinking. Each species sets its own priorities. To classify that as good or evil is really quite primitive, for the survival of any species argues for many varieties, among them your own, as well as for even the most varied of the worst or negatively directed deeds. I won't even exclude my own kind in this regard, for there have been certain occurrences in the past which I don't personally welcome, but about which I would also not like to go into detail. None of these occurrences have happened in the last 200 years of your time scale, but please note the following. There are no absolutely good and there are no absolutely bad species, because each and every species always consists of individuals.
In the letters that I got, there was often the question whether you could go into any greater detail regarding the advanced physics that you commented on last time. Many people said, your words made no sense. For example, how do UFOs function? How do they fly? How do they perform the maneuvers that they do?
I ought to explain that to people? That's not all that simple. Let me think about it for a minute. I always have to use very simple words in order to make clear to you the basic principles of a higher kind of science. Let's try this. You have to be clear about some fundamental facts. The very first thing is that you must divide up the conception of the physical world because each existence consists of different layers. Let's say, for simplicity's sake, that it consists of a material illusion and a sphere of influence.
Translator's note. No legitimate translation exists for this word, Feldraum. Feld means field. Raum means space, room, expanse. Therefore, I'm translating it as sphere of influence.
Certain physical conditions are associated only with the realm of the material, as in concrete, while other and more complicated conditions are associated only with the sphere of influence of the material world. Your conception of the physical world is based upon a simple material illusion. That illusion is further subdivided into three elementary or basic conditions of matter. A fourth and very important condition also exists, which you simply pay attention to more or less as you choose. It is the one bordering on the sphere of influence or plasma realm. For you, the theory for a controlled transformation or an elevation of the frequency of matter and the stable existence of this fourth aggregate condition of matter is not very common, or it exists at a very primitive level. As an aside, there are simply 5 states of matter, but the post-plasma state would really be going too far, and it would only serve to confuse you. Besides, it is not necessary for an understanding of the basic theory. It is connected with diverse phenomena, which you would characterize as paranormal. Now, back to the essentials, plasma. Now, with plasma, I don't mean just hot gas, as the concept is generally simplified by your people, but rather, I mean a higher aggregate condition of matter. The plasma state of matter is a special form of matter which lies between its real existence and the sphere of influence, that is, a complete loss of mass and pure accretion of energy of various form whenever matter is pushed or shoved.
Note: no explanation was given for the use of the word pushed, shoved, as used in this context. Your guess is as good as mine.
The fourth state of matter is very important for certain physical conditions, which can be used, for example, to, how should I express this to you, generate anti-gravity. That's a rather strange human word and not really correct, but you ought to understand it better this way. Essentially, in the world of real physics, there are no bipolar forces, but rather only observer-dependent reflective behavior of a single, large, unified force at different levels. With anti-gravity or the displacement of gravitational characteristics into levels, one can, for example, cause apparently solid matter to levitate. This method is employed partly by us and by extraterrestrials, as well as a means of propulsion for their UFOs. You people are moving on a really primitive level towards a similar principle for your secret military projects. But since you have more or less stolen this technology, and it was later falsely passed on to you intentionally by the extraterrestrials, you lack the real physical understanding. As a result, you have to struggle with problems of instability and radiation with your UFOs. According to my information, there have been a great number of deaths of your people because of intense radiation and field disturbances. Don't you agree? This is also an example of the business regarding the question of good and evil. You people play with unknown forces and thereby accept the death of colleagues of your own kind, for they are dying for a greater cause, namely, for the advancement of your technology, which, as a result, is being put into place once again for the purpose of war, i.e., for negative pursuits. Now, one can give you the benefit of the doubt that only the least number of your kind have any knowledge about these alien projects, which are, as you explain it, top secret. It was told to you that the higher the ordinal or ranking number of basic matter, the simpler the heightening of the condition, but that is only partially correct. If you can't circumvent these powers, then you're better off not attempting it. But your kind has always been ignorant and has from time immemorial tried to play around with forces which you have not even understood. Why would that ever change? You remember this business of copper fusion? By means of the fluctuation at the right angle with the induced radiation field, copper is fused with other elements. The illusion of matter is fused. The fields in the sphere of influence overlap each other, but the main force would be reflected by that process and would assume a quasi-bipolar character. The resulting connection and the field would therefore not be stable in the normal condition of matter and unsuited for tasks. As a result, the entire field spectrum is shifted to a higher plasma-like condition, whereby the spectrum comes together with this harsh shifting to the opposite pole side. The word is not correct, of the force field, and it resembles quite closely a gravitational shift. This shifting causes a tilting of the repulsing quasi-bipolar force, which now no longer flows to the interior of the force field, but rather flows partly to the exterior of the field. The result is an interstratifying reflective force field, which is very difficult to modulate within certain technical boundaries in relation to its own characteristics. It can also carry out a multiplicity of tasks, as for example, causing massive flying objects to be levitated and maneuvered. It can also exert a camouflage function in the realm of electromagnetic radiation, as well as manipulate temporal sequences of events, indeed only to very limited extent, and other things as well. Are you familiar with your quantum tunnel effect? Even the amplitude equalizations among genuine matter can be achieved with one of those kinds of fields, if the frequency and the distance from the plane of the field are high enough. Unfortunately, the whole thing that I have explained to you in your words has come out to be rather primitive, I'm afraid. It sounds rather strange and certainly impossible for your comprehension, but perhaps this simple explanation can be of some use to you in helping you to understand. But then again, maybe not.
Is there a scientific substantiation for paranormal powers, as for example with your powers of thought?
Yes, in order to explain that, one has to acknowledge the physical reality of the sphere of influence. Feldraum. I'll try to do it. Wait just a second. You are going to have to separate yourself mentally from the illusion that which you see is the true nature of the universe. It is, at best, the surface of a side. Imagine for yourself that all the matter here, you, this table, this pencil, this technical device, this paper, does not really exist, but that it is rather only the result of a field oscillation and a concentration of energy. All matter that you see, every creature, every planet and star in this universe, has an information energy equivalent in the sphere of influence which is located on a main field, the general level of things. Now, there is not only one level, but several. Last time, I had mentioned that highly developed species which is capable of changing levels, which is something completely different from the simple bubble changing, for bubbles are a part of each and every level. Do you understand? Dimensions, as you call them, are a part of a solitary bubble. Bubbles or universal foam are a part of a level, and levels are layers in the sphere of influence, while the sphere of influence, acting in the capacity of single physical size, is essentially unending. It is composed of innumerable information energy layers and general levels. There are in the sphere of influence no null levels. All are the same, but they are separated by means of their energy conditions. I notice that I am confusing you now. I think I ought to stop with this explanation.
No, please continue. How do concrete paranormal powers arise?
Well, okay then. Let's try something simpler. Again, it is not completely correct, but let's begin in this manner. Tangible matter on this side is mirrored in the sphere of influence, Feldraum, as a field with distinct layers. These layers contain information, as an example, about the simple structure of matter or the string frequency, but also there is stored information stemming from the development of matter. Are you familiar with the human concept of morphogenetic fields? One part of the layer could be designated as such. Now, there is still another intermediary layer for which you unfortunately have no human concept, since the theory is not common in human thinking. Let's call it a paralayer, for this layer is mainly responsible for everything which you call PSI and paranormal, and which lies outside the boundaries of your primitive science. This paralayer lies between the layers of matter and the morphogenetic layers of a field in the sphere of influence. It can actively integrate with both. Your body, for example, is mirrored as a field in the sphere of influence, Feldraum. that doesn't mean that it does not also exist here as well, as flesh, blood, bones, in the form of matter strings or atoms. But not only that, existence is always a duality. Some layers of the field contain simple information about the solid matter of your body and its frequency, while other layers contain information about your spirit, your consciousness, or, speaking from a human religious point of view, your soul. Awareness or consciousness, in this case, is a simple energy matrix divided into different layers of your field in the sphere of influence. Nothing more, nothing less. Genuine awareness can also exist here on the matter side, but only in the form of post-plasma, the fifth form of matter, with the necessary physical knowledge and the corresponding technology. The consciousness awareness matrix, or soul, can also be separated from its field of rest. It can, despite its removal, continue to exist in a self-sufficient manner for a certain amount of time. That has the strange occult name of soul robbing. But above all, we're talking about science here, not about magic or dark forces.
This concludes part 1 of 2. If you have enjoyed this retelling of the Lacerta Files, then hit that like and subscribe button so you can catch the next edition of the Lacerta Files and other stories from beyond.